Nobody expects a woman over 50 to start a war in her own living room. I only wanted peace. But then I heard my daughter-in-law whisper that she was abandoning my 8-year-old granddaughter, and my own son just agreed. They looked at me lying in that hospital bed and saw someone too weak to fight back. They were wrong. By the time I am finished, this whole town is going to hold its breath. My name is Margaret Ellington, and at 58 years old, I never imagined my life would come down to a moment of silent, paralyzed horror. The stroke had taken me by surprise, a sudden thunderclap in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, and now I lay in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. My eyelids felt as though they had been stitched shut with heavy thread. When I managed to force them open just a crack, the world was nothing but a smear of grey and white. The ceiling tiles swam in and out of focus, and my body felt like it had been filled with lead. I tried to lift my hand, just an inch, just to prove I was still in command of my own limbs. But nothing happened. The disconnection between my mind and my muscles was absolute. I was a prisoner in my own skin, drifting in a haze that threatened to pull me under for good. However, while my vision failed and my body refused to obey, my hearing had sharpened into something terrifyingly acute. It was as if my senses, realizing the ship was sinking, had funneled all remaining power to my ears. I could hear the squeak of rubber soles in the hallway, the rhythmic beep of the monitors, and then, cutting through the mechanical hum, a voice I had learned to tolerate but never quite trust. It was Vanessa Corbin, my daughter-in-law. Her voice was low, a hiss meant to be secretive, but to me, it sounded like a scream in a quiet library. "We cannot take her. Adam," Vanessa whispered. "Look at this mess. Your mother is done. She is barely conscious." I waited for Adam to defend me. I waited for my son, the boy I had raised on scraped knees and warm suppers after his father passed, to tell her to stop. I waited for him to say that we were a family and we would figure it out. Instead, I heard a sigh. It was a weak, pathetic sound that broke my heart more than the medical diagnosis ever could. "I know. Van," Adam replied, his voice trembling. "But just leaving her here like this, it feels wrong." "It is the only way," Vanessa insisted. The cruelty in her tone was not hot or angry. It was cold, calculated business. "The promotion in Nevada is strictly for people who can travel. You know what the regional manager said. They want flexibility. Children are anchors. Adam, they kill promotion opportunities. Do you want to stay a junior associate forever? Anchors." She called my sweet, 8-year-old granddaughter an anchor. The word hit me harder than the blood clot that had put me in this bed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to sit up, tear the IVs from my arm, and demand they get out of my room. But my tongue felt thick, a useless slab of meat in my mouth. I could not make a sound. I was trapped, forced to bear witness to the dismantling of my family while they thought I was too far gone to understand. "She has the house," Vanessa continued, her voice gaining confidence as she realized I remained motionless. "It is paid off. Lila knows the school here. We drop the bags, we leave the note, and we go. By the time the old woman wakes up, if she wakes up properly, we will be across state lines. Lila will be her problem." "She is going to hate us," Adam mumbled, though he was no longer arguing, only lamenting the inevitable. "She will not remember," Vanessa scoffed. "Look at her. She is a vegetable. Adam, we are doing her a favor. We are giving her company so she does not die alone. The fog in my brain began to clear, burned away by a white-hot rage. They thought I was gone. They thought I was a vegetable. My heart rate monitor must have ticked up, but they were too absorbed in their conspiracy to notice. This was not just selfishness. This was a discarding. They were throwing away a child like she was a piece of furniture that did not fit the aesthetic of their new life. A cold realization settled in my gut, sharper than the fear of death. The family I loved was gone. I heard the rustle of a coat and the click of a purse snapping shut. "It is decided, then," Vanessa said, her voice final, leaving no room for argument. "We leave tonight. The girl stays here. Forever." The silence of the hospital room allowed the past to flood in, washing over me with a clarity that was both gentle and agonizing. My mind drifted back 30 years to the day 2 police officers stood on my porch, twisting their hats in their hands, unable to look me in the eye. The accident at the factory had been swift, they said. Robert felt no pain. That was the day my life as a wife ended and my life as a warrior began. I did not have the luxury of grief. I had a 5-year-old boy who needed shoes and a roof. So I buried my husband on a Friday and started working at Crown Vale Community Records the following Monday. For 2 decades. I spent my days in that dusty basement office, surrounded by the smell of old paper and damp concrete. I filed birth certificates for babies who would grow up to leave this town, and death certificates for old men who had never stepped foot outside the county line. It was tedious, back-breaking work that paid barely enough to keep the lights on. But I did it for Adam. I remembered the boy he used to be. I remembered how he would wait for me at the bus stop, his small hands clutching a wildflower he had plucked from the roadside. He used to tell me that when he grew up, he would buy me a castle so I would never have to file another paper again. That boy had a heart so big I thought it might burst from his chest. Where had that boy gone? The change had been slow, insidious, like water seeping into a foundation. It started when he met Vanessa. She was not a monster at first glance. She was sharp, ambitious, and polished in a way that people in Havensbrook rarely were. But she was cold. When Lila was born 8 years ago, I thought the baby would be the bridge to bring us all back together. I remember holding Lila for the first time, looking into her eyes and seeing the same spark my husband once had. She was my second chance. She was the hope that all those years of struggle had meant something. However, Vanessa viewed family not as a bond, but as a series of obligations to be managed or discarded. She controlled Adam not with shouts or threats, but with a withering disapproval that made him shrink. Havensbrook is a town where the rhythm of life is slow, and the currency of the community is information. Everyone knows when your grass is too long, and they certainly know when your son stops visiting. I spent years making excuses for him at the grocery store. I told Mrs. Gable at the bakery that Adam was just so busy with his big job in the city. I lied to protect his reputation, and perhaps to protect my own pride. The truth was far uglier. Adam had never found his footing in the world. His business ventures had failed one after another, leaving him financially dependent on Vanessa's corporate ladder climb. He had traded his voice for security. Every time he looked at her, I saw the fear in his eyes. He was terrified of losing the lifestyle she provided. So he paid for it with his soul. I lay there in the dark, realizing that the betrayal I had just overheard was not a sudden event. It was the final collapse of a structure that had been rotting for years. I had seen the way Vanessa rolled her eyes when Lila wanted a hug. I had seen the way Adam stayed silent when Vanessa insulted my cooking or my home. I had ignored the signs because I wanted to believe my son was still the boy with the wildflower. I was wrong. The boy I raised was gone, replaced by a man who would abandon his own daughter to please a wife who despised him. The cracks had always been there. I just refused to look at them until the roof caved in. I concentrated every ounce of my remaining will into the tip of my right index finger. I needed to move it. I needed to twitch a muscle, tap the bed rail, do anything to signal that I was still here, still a person, and not the convenient corpse they assumed I had become. It felt like trying to lift a boulder with a piece of thread. My body remained a heavy, silent tomb, betraying me while my mind screamed for action. Nevada is a clean break. Adam? Vanessa said. Her voice was closer now, hovering near the foot of my bed. We get the apartment in Las Vegas near the new office. It is adults only, strict lease terms, no kids allowed. It is perfect. But Mom, Adam started, then stopped. Your mother is resilient. Vanessa cut him off, her tone dismissive. She raised you alone, did she not? She can handle Lila? And if she cannot? Well, that is where the paperwork comes in handy. I heard the rustle of stiff paper. I spoke to the attending physician in the hallway. Vanessa continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial level that made my skin crawl. The stroke affected her motor functions, but the cognitive damage is still being assessed. If we play this right, we can use these medical charts. We declare her mentally incompetent due to the trauma. That gives us power of attorney. Adam. We get control of her assets to manage her care. My blood ran cold. It was not just about abandoning their daughter. It was a raid. Vanessa was planning to strip me of my autonomy. She wanted to leave her child on my doorstep like an unwanted parcel, and then use my medical condition to seize the house I had worked 30 years to pay off. This was the house the state had subsidized for me as a widow, the only security I had left. She would take the deed, sell the roof over my head, and leave me and Lila destitute while she sipped cocktails in Nevada. I waited for the explosion. I waited for Adam to shout that this was evil, that she was talking about his mother and his daughter. But the only sound in the room was the hum of the air conditioner and the shallow, terrified breathing of my son. His silence was a physical blow, heavier and more damaging than the clot that had blocked the vessel in my brain. His silence told me that he was not just a victim of her manipulation. He was an accomplice. He was willing to sacrifice me to keep her happy. The tears that had been gathering in the corners of my eyes suddenly stopped. Grief is a heavy, wet blanket that smothers you. But rage is fuel. It burned through the fog in my mind, sharp and clarifying. I realized then that if I did not move, if I did not wake up right now, Lila would be lost. They would leave her here with a grandmother they planned to legally destroy. They would take the house, the money, and the future, leaving us to the mercy of the state foster system once they sold the property out from under us. No. The word did not pass my lips, but it echoed in my skull like a gunshot. I would not let them win. I would not let them discard Lila. I would not let them take my home. The despair vanished, replaced by a cold, hard determination. I stopped trying to move my whole hand. I focused only on the pinky finger of my left hand, the one hidden under the sheet. I imagined the nerve firing. I imagined the signal traveling down my spine, bypassing the damage, finding a new path. Twitch. It was microscopic, barely a flutter. But I felt it, a tiny spark of control in the darkness. It was enough. They thought they were leaving a helpless old woman behind. They had no idea that they had just awakened something far more dangerous. I closed my eyes, not in sleep, but in concentration. I had to time this perfectly. I had to wait for them to leave the room, and then I had to get to a phone. The moment the heavy door clicked shut behind Adam and Vanessa, the room fell into a suffocating silence. I did not have time to weep over their betrayal. I had to move. My left hand, the one that still obeyed my commands, felt heavy and foreign, like a block of wood attached to my wrist. I concentrated on lifting it, inch by painful inch, until it hovered over my right arm. My fingers were clumsy and numb, but I managed to hook my thumb under the wire of the pulse oximeter taped to my finger. With a sharp tug that sent a jolt of pain up my arm, I ripped it free. The monitor let out a shrill protest, but I reached over and pressed the silence button I had watched the nurse use earlier that morning. The room went quiet again. Step 1 was done. I reached for the landline phone on the bedside table. It felt like lifting a dumbbell. My fingers shook as I dialed the number I had memorized 30 years ago, Helena Morris. She was a shark in the courtroom, a woman who ate corporate lawyers for breakfast. But to me, she was just the girl who sat next to me in 11th grade biology. She lived 2 hours away in the city, a distance that felt like an ocean right now. She answered on the third ring. "Helena," I croaked. My voice sounded like gravel grinding together. "Margaret, is everything all right? I heard about the stroke." Her voice was sharp, instantly alert. "They are leaving her," I whispered, forcing the words out through a throat that felt like sandpaper. "Adam and Vanessa. They are leaving Lila tonight. They are taking the car and leaving her at the house." There was a pause on the other end, a silence so thick I could almost hear her processing the legal ramifications. Then came the fury. "Do not move. I am getting in the car right now. I will be there in 2 hours." "I cannot wait," I said. "I have to go home. Lila is alone." I hung up before she could argue. The clock on the wall read 7 o'clock. Shift change. It was the only window I had. The nurses would be gathered at the central station, exchanging charts and gossip, their backs turned to the hallway. I threw the thin hospital blanket off my legs. The air hit my skin like a slap. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. My right leg was dead weight, a useless anchor dragging me down, but my left leg held. I gritted my teeth and pushed myself upright. The pain was blinding. It shot up my spine and exploded behind my eyes. I grabbed the IV pole for support, my knuckles turning white. I found my coat in the narrow closet where Adam had stuffed it, a small mercy. I pulled it over my hospital gown, not caring how ridiculous I looked. I was not a patient anymore. I was a grandmother. I opened the door a crack. The hallway was a blur of activity, but just as I had hoped, the nurses were huddled in a circle 20 feet away. I slipped out. Every step was a battle. My right foot dragged across the linoleum with a soft scuffing sound that seemed deafening to my ears. I kept my head down, moving with a slow, agonizing determination toward the exit sign that glowed red at the end of the corridor. I made it to the service elevator without being seen. When the doors opened to the loading dock, the night air hit me, cold and smelling of diesel and rain. I was out, but I was still miles from home. I limped toward a delivery truck idling near the ramp. The driver, a young man with a cap pulled low, looked up from his clipboard, startled by the sight of an old woman in a hospital gown and a wool coat stumbling toward him. "Ma'am," he asked, stepping forward. "Are you okay?" "My son." I lied, the falsehood tasting bitter on my tongue. "He forgot to pick me up. I need to get to Elm Street. Please." He looked at me, then at the hospital doors, then back at me. He must have seen the desperation in my eyes, or maybe he just did not want to be the guy who left a stroke victim in the cold. "Hop in," he said. "It is on my way." The ride was short, but brutal. Every bump in the road sent shockwaves through my aching body. I stared out the window as the familiar streets of Havensbrook rolled by. The pharmacy, the post office, the park where I used to push Adam on the swings. It all looked the same, yet everything had changed. I closed my eyes and saw Lila. I saw her sitting on the sofa, her small legs tucked under her, waiting for parents who were never coming back. That image fueled me. It gave me the strength to keep my head up when the driver pulled up to the curb of my house. "Thanks," I muttered, sliding out of the high cab. I stood on the sidewalk as the truck drove away. The house was dark. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. The driveway was empty. They were gone. Fear and relief washed over me in equal measure. They had actually done it. They had left her. I limped up the walkway, my key trembling in my hand, ready to face the wreckage of my life. The house felt cold. It was not the kind of cold that comes from a drafty window or a broken furnace, but the hollow, echoing chill of a place that has been stripped of its soul. I limped into the living room, my right leg dragging like a dead weight across the hardwood floor. The silence was absolute, heavy enough to crush the air out of my lungs. There, curled up on the beige sofa I had bought 10 years ago, was Lila. She looked so small. Her knees were pulled up to her chest, and she was hugging a throw pillow as if it were a life raft in the middle of a storm. When she heard the door close, she flinched. Her eyes widened, not with relief, but with a terrifying confusion. She did not run to me. She stayed frozen, waiting for the next blow to fall. "Grandma," she whispered. Her voice was so small it barely reached me. "Mommy said you were sick. She said you were not coming home." I moved toward her, ignoring the screaming protest of my muscles. I sat down heavily beside her, the springs of the old couch groaning under my weight. "I am here, sweetie. I am right here." Lila looked at the front door, then back at me. Her lower lip trembled. "Mommy and Daddy said they had to go. They said they are not coming back. Grandma, they took the car." I felt the air leave my lungs. Hearing the plan from Vanessa in the hospital was one thing. Hearing it confirmed by the innocent victim was another. It tore me apart. "Am I bad?" Lila asked, her voice cracking. "Did I do something wrong? Grandma, is that why they left?" That question broke me. It shattered whatever composure I had managed to cobble together during that nightmare ride from the hospital. I reached out and pulled her into my arms. My chest ached. A sharp, physical pain that radiated from my heart to my fingertips. But I held her tighter. I wanted to squeeze the doubt out of her. I wanted to absorb her pain into my own broken body so she would never have to feel it again. "No, baby. No," I managed to say, my voice thick with unshed tears. "You are perfect. You did nothing wrong. This is not your fault. Do you hear me?" Never think that. We sat there for a long time, two castaways in a silent house. Eventually, the practicalities of survival forced me to move. I needed to feed her. I stood up, leaning heavily on the wall for support, and made my way to the kitchen. I opened the refrigerator door and stared into the abyss. It was empty. They had not just left. They had looted the place. The shelves were bare. The milk, the eggs, the cheese, even the half-eaten jar of strawberry jam Lila loved, it was all gone. I checked the pantry, the pasta, the cans of soup, the box of crackers gone. Vanessa had taken everything. She had stripped the house of food, knowing full well she was leaving an 8-year-old child and a stroke victim behind. It was a level of pettiness that stole my breath away. She wanted us to starve, or perhaps she just did not care if we did. I found a forgotten packet of instant oatmeal in the back of a drawer and a single apple in the fruit bowl on the counter. That was our dinner. We ate in silence at the kitchen table. Lila chewed slowly, her eyes red and swollen, staring at her reflection in the spoon. There was a knock at the back door. It was Mrs. Gable from next door. She stood there in her robe, clutching a casserole dish, her face pale. I saw them. Margaret, she said quietly, handing me the dish through the doorway. I saw Vanessa loading the trunk. She took everything. The silver, the electronics, even the linens. I asked her where they were going, and she just sped off. I thought you were with them. I am here, I said, my voice hard. And Lila is here. Mrs. Gable nodded, her eyes darting to the little girl at the table. She planned this. Margaret. I saw her moving boxes into the garage 2 days ago. This was not sudden. I closed my eyes. 2 days ago. While I was still healthy, while I was cooking them dinner, Vanessa was already packing my house into boxes. It was a premeditated execution of our family bond. Thank you for the food, I said, taking the dish. After she left, I locked the door. I went back to Lila, who had pushed her bowl away. She was crying again, silent tears that rolled down her cheeks and onto the table. I wiped them away with my good hand. We are going to be okay, I told her. And for the first time that night, I believed it. Not because I had a plan, but because I had no other choice. I put her to bed in my room, afraid to let her out of my sight. As she drifted into a fitful sleep, I sat in the rocking chair by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on. The sorrow that had threatened to drown me earlier was receding, replaced by a cold, steel resolve. Vanessa and Adam thought they had destroyed me. They thought they had left behind a ruin. They were wrong. They had just given me a reason to live. I looked at Lila's sleeping face and made a silent vow to the universe. I would tear the world apart with my bare hands if that was what it took to keep her safe. Helena arrived just as the sun began to bleed through the curtains, casting long, pale shadows across the living room floor. She did not knock. She just used the spare key I had given her a decade ago, a relic of a time when we thought emergencies meant lost cats or broken pipes, not abandoned children. She walked in carrying a briefcase that looked heavy enough to contain bricks, her face set in a grim line that I knew meant she was ready for war. I did some digging on the drive over, Helena said, bypassing pleasantries. She set the briefcase on the coffee table and snapped the latches open. It is worse than we thought. Margaret. She pulled out a stack of papers and spread them out. This, she pointed to a document with a hospital letterhead, is a draft for a competency hearing. It was filed 3 days ago. before your stroke even happened. I stared at the paper. My name was typed at the top. How? I whispered. Vanessa has been building a case. Helena explained, her voice tight. She has been documenting incidents of forgetfulness, missed appointments, confusion, all fabricated, of course. But on paper, it looks like a pattern of decline. She was setting the stage to have you declared unfit so she could legally dump Lila on you and then claim control of your assets as your guardian. My hands shook as I picked up the next sheet. It was a bank statement, or rather, the lack of one. The joint account you set up for Lila's college fund, Helena asked gently. Empty, drained on Tuesday morning. The transfer went to an account in Nevada under Vanessa's maiden name. The betrayal was physical. It felt like a punch to the gut. They had stolen from their own daughter. But here is the smoking gun, Helena said, pulling out a tablet. Vanessa is arrogant. She thinks she is smarter than everyone else. She forgot that your son logged into his email on your old desktop computer last Thanksgiving and never logged out. Helena tapped the screen, opening an email thread. The subject line read, Fresh Start. It was from Vanessa to a friend named Jessica. I read the words, and nausea rose in my throat. The promotion is mine if I can be in Vegas by the 1st. Adam is on board. Finally. The kid is the only snag. She is 8, she is needy, and frankly, she is a buzzkill. I am leaving her with the old bat. Margaret will be too guilt-ridden to say no, and if she kicks the bucket, the state can have the girl. I just want a clean slate. Jess, no baggage, just me, Adam, and the money. Baggage, I whispered. She called her own child baggage. There is more, Helena said, her expression dark. She played a video file. It was footage from my own doorbell camera, dated 2 days ago. The grainy image showed Adam and Vanessa standing on the porch. She is not going. Adam. Vanessa's voice was sharp, cutting through the wind. I am not dragging an 8-year-old across the country just so you can play daddy on the weekends. She stays. We start over. We are free. Adam's voice was a mumble, his head down, kicking at a loose brick. Mom is going to flip. Let her flip, Vanessa snapped. She is old. Who is going to listen to her? The video ended. Helena looked at me. They did not just abandon her. Margaret. They conspired to endanger a minor and defraud a vulnerable adult. This is criminal. But right now, we have a bigger problem. They are technically still the legal guardians. If they find out you are awake and fighting, they could come back and take Lila just to spite you. Or worse, put her in the system to keep her away from you. We have to stop them, I said, the words tasting like iron. We will, Helena said, pulling a pen from her pocket. We file for emergency temporary custody immediately. We use the abandonment, the theft, and the fraud as evidence. We flip the script. We do not wait for them to explain. We attack first. I looked at the papers scattered on the table. The lies, the theft, the cold-blooded planning. They wanted a war. They were going to get one. Do it, I said. Take everything they have. Helena filed the emergency custody petition at 9 o'clock sharp the next morning. The legal system usually grinds slowly, but when you attach evidence of child abandonment and elder abuse, wheels turn with surprising speed. By 11:30, the gravel in my driveway crunched under the tires of a heavy vehicle. They had come back. Adam and Vanessa had likely been halfway to the state line when their phones alerted them to the legal filing. Fear of prosecution does wonders for parental attentiveness. They did not burst in with apologies. They walked in with the confident swagger of people who believed they could talk their way out of a murder charge. Vanessa wore a cream-colored coat that probably cost $2,000, looking pristine and utterly out of place in my modest living room. Adam trailed behind her, eyes glued to his shoes, looking like a man marching to the gallows, but too cowardly to run. "Margaret," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that made my stomach turn. "What is all this nonsense about lawyers? We were just halfway to the city to get supplies. We saw the notification and turned right around. You have everyone worked up over nothing." I stood by the fireplace, leaning heavily on my cane. I did not offer them a seat. "You took the food, Vanessa. You emptied the bank accounts. You left an 8-year-old girl with a woman who could barely walk." Vanessa waved her hand dismissively, as if I were complaining about the weather. "We were in a rush. Logistics are messy. But look, let us cut to the chase. We talked in the car." She took a step forward, her face hardening into a mask of arrogant resolve. "We decided she stays. We are doing this for her. The move to Nevada is going to be chaotic. It is no place for a child. She stays here with you. It is better this way. We are generous enough to let you keep her." The audacity took my breath away. She was not asking. She was informing me. She was framing her heartless abandonment as a benevolence. She stood there in my living room, stripping me of my dignity and her daughter of a future. And she expected me to thank her for it. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, but from a rage so hot it threatened to burn through my chest. "You think you can just dump her here like old furniture?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Do not be dramatic," Vanessa snapped. She looked at Adam. "Tell her." "Adam." Adam shifted his weight, refusing to meet my gaze. He looked at the wall, at the floor, anywhere but at his mother. "It makes sense. Mum," he mumbled, his voice hollow. "You are lonely. Lila needs stability. It is a win-win." "A win-win," I repeated, disgusted. "You are abandoning your child." Vanessa stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. She played her next card, the one I knew was coming. "Careful with your words, Margaret. You just had a stroke. I spoke to Dr. Evans yesterday. He mentioned confusion, memory loss, emotional instability. If you push this, I will have to bring those records to court. I will paint you as a senile, incompetent old woman who cannot even take care of herself, let alone a child. I will have you put in a home so fast your head will spin, and then Lila goes to foster care. Is that what you want?" She was gaslighting me, using my own medical trauma as a weapon to silence me. For a moment, the room spun. The cruelty was suffocating. She was so sure of her victory, so sure that I was too weak to fight back. Then, a small voice cut through the toxic air. "You are lying!" We all turned. Lila stood in the hallway entrance. She looked tiny in her oversized pajamas, clutching the doorframe with white knuckles. Her face was pale, but her eyes were burning. "Lila, honey, go to your room," Vanessa commanded, her voice tight with warning. "No," Lila said. She did not retreat. She stepped into the room, her small body shaking with the force of her words. "You did not go to get supplies. You told Daddy that you were never coming back. You said I was a mistake. You said I ruined your life." Vanessa froze. The color drained from her face, replaced instantly by a flush of ugly, defensive anger. "I heard you," Lila continued, her voice rising, cracking with emotion. You said Grandma was going to die soon anyway, so it did not matter. You left me. The mask shattered. Vanessa abandoned the cool, collected act. She lunged forward, pointing a manicured finger at her daughter. You ungrateful little brat. We give you everything, we work ourselves to death for you. And you stand there and lie. You are twisting everything. She spun around to glare at me, her teeth bared. You did this. You poisoned her against us. You are using her to get to me. She is telling the truth, I shouted, stepping between Vanessa and Lila. And you know it. She is a child. She does not know what she is saying. Vanessa screamed, her composure gone, replaced by the desperate shrieking of a woman who realizes she is losing control. I am her mother. I decide what happens. She is staying here, and you are going to shut up and take her, or I will destroy you both. You will not destroy anyone, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. Because you are done. I looked toward the kitchen shadows. Helena, did you get all that? Helena stepped out, her phone held high, the red recording light blinking steadily in the dim room. Every word, Margaret. Every single word. Helena stepped fully into the light. She did not look like my old high school friend anymore. She looked like the prosecutor she was born to be. She slapped a folder onto the dining table. It landed with a sound like a gunshot. Forgery, Helena announced, her voice cutting through Vanessa's screeching. Attempted fraud. Conspiracy to endanger a minor. Do you want me to keep going? Or should I skip straight to the emails where you discussed dumping Lila like she was a stray dog? Vanessa stared at the folder. Her face went from red to a sickly shade of white. She recognized the printouts. She saw the timestamps. The arrogance evaporated, leaving behind the naked panic of a predator caught in a trap. That is private, she stammered. You hacked my account. That is illegal. It is discovery, Helena countered, cold as ice. And it is admissible when investigating child abandonment. Adam made a sound like a wounded animal. He sank onto the sofa, putting his head in his hands. He looked small, pathetic. Van. They know, he whispered. They know everything. The front door was still open from their arrival, and by now, the shouting had drawn an audience. Mrs. Gable was there on the porch, along with Mr. Henderson from across the street. They stood in silent judgment, witnessing the ugly underbelly of the American dream unraveling in my living room. Vanessa saw them. She saw the condemnation in their eyes. The shame of Havensbrook is a heavy thing, and she could feel its weight crushing her. I am leaving, Vanessa announced, grabbing her purse. She turned toward the door, shoving past Adam. I am not listening to this insane old woman and her fake lawyer. Adam, get in the car. Sit down. Vanessa, Helena said. She did not shout, but the command froze Vanessa in her tracks. Helena held up a document stamped with the county seal. This is a temporary restraining order and a summons. You are not going anywhere until the police arrive to take a statement regarding the child neglect charges. If you step off this property, you will be arrested for fleeing a criminal investigation. Vanessa stopped. She looked at the door, then at Helena, and finally at Adam. She realized she was trapped. Adam, she shrieked. Do something, defend your wife. Adam looked up. His eyes were rimmed with red, wet with tears that I could no longer find it in myself to pity. I cannot, he sobbed. I cannot do it any more. Van, It is too much. He looked at me then, and for a second, I saw the ghost of the boy I loved. I am sorry, Mum. The pressure. The debt. The promotion was the only way out. She said it would be better for Lila. She said you would take care of her. You agreed to throw your daughter away because you were stressed, I asked, my voice trembling. You agreed to let your wife declare me insane so you could steal my house. I just wanted it to stop. Adam wept. I just wanted the fighting to stop. Lila let out a wail that tore through the room. She ran to me, burying her face in my stomach, her small arms wrapping around my legs so tightly it hurt. Grandma, make them go away, she cried. I do not want to go with them. Please. I stroked Lila's hair, feeling the tremors shaking her tiny body. I looked at my son. I looked at the man who had once promised to buy me a castle. He was a stranger to me now, a weak, broken stranger who had sold his own flesh and blood for a chance at an easy life. The room fell silent. The neighbours on the porch held their breath. Vanessa stood fuming by the door, defeated. Adam sat weeping on the couch. Get out, I said. Mum, please. Adam begged. I am your son. I looked him dead in the eye. I did not lose a son today. Adam. He abandoned his family a long time ago. You are just the man who drove the getaway car. The emergency hearing convened at 10 in the morning on a Friday, under a sky that was a slate-grey sheet of rain. The courtroom was a sterile box of polished wood and fluorescent light, a fitting place to surgically remove the cancer that had infected my family. Helena had pulled every legal lever she had to get us in front of Judge Halloway so quickly. She knew that speed was our greatest weapon. The charges were read aloud by the prosecutor, and the air in the room grew heavy with the weight of them. Vanessa was formally accused of intentional abandonment of a minor, a felony in our state that carried the potential for significant prison time. Adam was not spared either. He was being investigated for complicity and child neglect. Vanessa sat at the defense table, stiff and angry, wearing a suit that looked too sharp for a criminal proceeding. She refused to look at me. Adam, on the other hand, looked like a man who wished the floor would open up and swallow him whole. He was pale and sweating, his hands clasping and unclasping in his lap. The pivotal moment came when Lila was brought in to speak. I hated that she had to be there. I wanted to shield her from the ugliness of it all. But Helena insisted her voice was the only one that mattered. When Judge Halloway asked her what happened that night, she did not cry. She did not stutter. She just looked at her parents with eyes that were far too old for her 8-year-old face. She told the court clearly that her mother had packed the bags while she was at school. She told them about the conversation she heard through the door, the one where they decided she was too much trouble to take to Nevada because she would ruin their fresh start. She repeated the words Vanessa had said about me dying soon anyway. The silence that followed her testimony was absolute. It was not just quiet, it was a vacuum. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a heartbeat. It was the sound of a room collectively losing its faith in humanity. The judgment was swift and merciless. Judge Halloway looked at me, then at the mountain of evidence Helena had provided, and finally at the papers before him. He granted me full, permanent guardianship, effective immediately. He then turned his gaze on Adam. I watched my son shrink under the weight of that stare. The judge told him that the first people a child learns to trust are her parents, and he had shattered that trust beyond repair. He said that Adam had turned his back on the one person in the world he was sworn to protect. That was when Vanessa snapped. The reality of her situation finally pierced her armor of arrogance. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, and started screaming. She shouted that the court was rigged, that I had manipulated the situation, and that the entire town of Havensbrook was a backward pit conspiring against her success. She pointed a shaking finger at me and shrieked that I was a thief who had stolen her daughter to fill my empty life. It was a display of pure, unfiltered narcissism. The bailiff moved in instantly. When Vanessa tried to shove him away to get to the aisle, he restrained her. The click of handcuffs echoed through the chamber. As they dragged her out, still shouting obscenities about how she was the victim, I felt nothing but a cold, solid sense of relief. She was gone. Adam remained. He looked up at the judge, tears streaming down his face, and asked about visitation. He wanted to know when he could see Lila again. Judge Halloway looked at him with cold indifference and said that given the severity of the abandonment and the trauma inflicted, there would be no visitation. The rights were terminated indefinitely. Adam collapsed onto the table, sobbing into his sleeves, a sound of pure despair. He had lost his mother, his wife, and now his daughter, all because he was too weak to stand up for any of them. I took the hand of my granddaughter and walked out of the courtroom, leaving him alone in the wreckage he had helped create. The drive home was bathed in the golden light of a late afternoon sun that seemed to be apologizing for the storm we had just weathered. When we pulled into the driveway, the house did not look like a battleground anymore. It just looked like home. We walked up the path, my cane clicking rhythmically against the pavement, and for the first time since the stroke, my chest did not feel tight with anxiety. We were safe. The monsters were gone, banished by the gavel of a judge who saw through their lies. Inside, the air was still, but it was a peaceful stillness. I hung my coat on the rack and turned to see Lila standing in the middle of the living room. She was twisting the hem of her shirt, looking down at her sneakers. The victory in court had not erased the scars on her heart overnight. "Grandma?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Am I going to be a burden, I mean, because of your medicine and the money Mommy said I cost too much?" The question hit me harder than any physical blow. I ignored the stiffness in my joints and the protest of my recovering muscles, and I lowered myself down to my knees. It was painful, but I needed to be on her level. I took her small face in my hands and looked straight into her tear-filled eyes. "Lila, look at me," I said, my voice steady and fierce. "You are not a burden. You are the reason I woke up. You are the reason I fought. You are the most beautiful thing left in my life, and taking care of you is the greatest honor I have ever had. Do not ever let anyone tell you otherwise." She collapsed into me, sobbing, and I held her until the shadows stretched long across the floor. In the weeks that followed, the letters started arriving. They were from Adam. He sent envelope after envelope, filled with pages of apologies and excuses, begging for me to pick up the phone. I stacked them in a drawer in the kitchen, unopened. I did not hate him, but I knew that forgiveness given too cheaply is worthless. He needed to sit with his choices. He needed to feel the silence he had tried to inflict on us. He had to learn to stand on his own feet before he could ever hope to walk back into our lives. Vanessa, on the other hand, faced a reckoning that was public and brutal. The criminal charges destroyed her reputation overnight. The career she had sacrificed her family for evaporated the moment the local news picked up the story. She was facing jail time, and from what I heard, She was doing it alone. Life in Havensbrook changed for us. We were poorer now. The pension was small, and we had to be careful with every penny. There were no more fancy dinners or new gadgets, but we had something better. We had a community. The neighbours who had watched the police arrive came back, not to gossip, but to help. Mr. Henderson fixed the leaking gutter for free. Mrs. Gable brought over casseroles twice a week. They respected that I had stood my ground. And in a small town, respect is worth more than gold. One evening, I walked into the kitchen to find Lila taping a drawing to the refrigerator. It was done in bright crayons. It showed a big house with the sun smiling in the corner. And in the front yard, there were just two stick figures holding hands. One was small, and one was holding a cane. Underneath, in sloppy block letters, she had written "The New Family." I looked at it, and a smile spread across my face. It was true. I had lost a son. I had grieved for the boy he used to be and the man he failed to become. However, in the ashes of that loss, I had saved a granddaughter. I walked over to the window and looked out at the quiet street. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. I felt a profound sense of relief settle over me. I realized then that revenge is not always about shouting or fighting or making the other person hurt. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply refusing to be destroyed. It is loving the child they threw away. It is surviving when they expected you to die. It is proving that justice, protection, and a stubborn, unyielding love are the most powerful forces on earth. We were here, we were together, and we were staying. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below, sharing your location and your thoughts on Margaret's decision. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, hit the like button, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people.